Happy October, everybody. This is one of my favorite times of year in the garden. The sun is a little lower in the sky. The way the light hits the color in the garden is gorgeous, and everything is kind of putting on that final flush before the really cold weather hits. Now this year, at least here in Ohio in Zone 6, has been unusually warm. Usually our first frost is about October 15th here. This year it's looking like our first chance won't even be till this weekend, which is about a week and a half later than usual. It's also been unseasonably warm, but I always enjoy doing one last garden tour before that frost hits. So I thought I'd show you today what is going on in the garden. Let's take a look. Now first I wanted to share with you some of the flowers in the garden because the colors always look amazing this time of year. My big blue salvia is at its prime right now, and this will last through the first couple of frosts. It's fairly cold tolerant. And this is a great late season nectar source for the bees. My Xochi marigolds are still hanging in there. Now you can see these blooms aren't as large as they were when I showed you earlier in the summer, but they're still putting on a lot of blooms right now. My Signet marigolds and Happy Mix marigolds are still pumping out the blooms. This red salvia, and I apologize, I forget the name. This was just some I picked up from a box store. Color is really fantastic, but it's really not attracting any pollinators, which I'm really disappointed with. I probably won't be growing this one again. And behind me here, you can see the beautiful heavenly blue morning glories that were very, very late to bloom this year, but are now really putting on a nice show. That color is just hard to beat. Over here is another of my favorite garden flowers / herbs. This is a borage planting, and again, a wonderful food for the bees and other pollinators this time of year. I have not planted any of this. I planted borage from seed last spring, and it's been volunteering ever since. And with borage here, I will typically get a flush in the spring, and then again in the fall. It does not like the heat, so these plants all kind of melt away in the summer and get kind of nasty looking. I just hack them all back, and they flush back in the fall in the cool weather. Pineapple sage is putting on its last flush here. And this is an herb with a wonderful scented leaf. It does kind of smell like pineapple, and this attracts hummingbirds and butterflies in particular. All of the nasturtiums that you'll see in the garden today are also volunteers. I planted last year, allowed the seeds to drop, and they just come up everywhere. I love these for their spreading habit and for their bright, vibrant colors. I'm not big into edible flowers, but I do actually really enjoy nasturtium. They have a very peppery, almost radishy heat. But then when you get down to where the nectar is, you get this subtle sweetness that really complements that spiciness. And they're quite tasty. And all parts of the nasturtium are edible, the leaves, the flowers, and the seeds. So I feel like sometimes it's an overlooked multi-use plant that is really easy to grow. Yet another volunteer and really great late season food for the bees. This is holy basil, and it will turn into a bit of a weed in your garden if you let it. It readily self-sows, but it's also very easy to pull up and get rid of if you don't want it. This is one of those polarizing plants where I feel like either people just love the smell or think it's disgusting. I'm on the love it camp. I love the way this stuff smells. In addition to being a great food for the bees, holy basil is an adaptogen. So it is an herb that helps your body cope with stress, which I don't know about you all, but I can definitely use some of that. This is really easy to make into a tea. You can dehydrate it and grind it up. My sister just did this. She dried up a bunch of this, powdered it, and then mixed it into local honey, which is a wonderful treat. You can make tinctures. There's a lot of versatility there, but super easy to grow, a wonderful addition to any garden.
And here are my Carmencita castor beans. This variety has more reddish purple coloration. It is more compact than the standard castor beans that I grew last year. But in addition to the gorgeous color, what I like is these actually mature quickly enough to produce mature seeds in my climate, which the standard full-size castor beans didn't do. So I can save seeds of this one, which is pretty cool.
Now on to the veggies. I've got a good mix of warm season and cool season crops still going on, so I'll show you a little bit of both. In front of me here are my fall cauliflower. Now all of these cauliflower and my broccoli and cabbage and kohlrabi, up until just a few days ago, I had insect netting over all of these. My plants are kind of outgrowing my hoops, so I removed everything. I'm kind of hoping for that fall frost now to get rid of some of my cabbage worm pressure, because as you will see in a minute, they have really done a number to my Brussels sprouts. Typically, once I remove these row covers, I have to start just about a weekly spray with a BT product. I like to use Green Step to keep the cabbage worms from just completely decimating these plants, because we definitely have a high population this fall and they are really capable of doing a lot of damage. Now on my Brussels sprouts, you'll see they've really chewed up the leaves. Luckily, I've still got quite a few sprouts, but you'll see what can happen when they're left unchecked.
You can see all the damage these worms can do. There's one of the culprits right there. One of the surest forms of pest control. But they definitely chew these leaves up. Luckily, I still have some sprouts here. And I'm curious if anyone else has to support their Brussels sprout stalks and what you are using to do that with. I'm just using folded up tomato cages here, but I'm trying to plan better for next year. I don't like this solution. So if anyone has some good solutions for supporting these plants, be sure to drop a line in the comments below. And in the same planting row, I've got more of my other fall crops, some fennel, some kohlrabi coming along, some Chinese cabbage, and the slugs really did a number to this Chinese cabbage. They really seem to like it. And slugs are not a pest that I typically have a problem with, so these guys caught me a bit by surprise. I did find that dusting the plants regularly with diatomaceous earth helps a lot, but these plants being under the netting, the damage kind of escaped me till I pulled the netting off the other day. Got some ball-headed cabbage here. More cabbage. I've already harvested some kohlrabi. I've got a couple different varieties of broccoli through here. Some of these are just starting to put on little heads. My purple sprouting broccoli. Some volunteer dill back here.
And peppers are still going strong. I am still picking peppers like crazy. It's always a trick this time of year to get them picked and used up before that frost hits. And typically when I have a huge onslaught of peppers like this to use up, I just chop them and throw them in the freezer. I do pickled peppers, or one of my favorites is a fermented hot sauce, which is incredibly tasty and a great way to use up a lot of hot peppers.
I've got fall planted bulb onions in 2 different locations this year, and one batch I'm going to cover and I'm going to leave the other batch uncovered just to test how truly winter hardy they are. Celery is still going strong. This was planted this past spring and I've been harvesting for months. I've really been impressed with a new variety I'm growing this year called Kelvin. It has produced the biggest, tastiest stalks of any of the varieties that I've tried. A lot of cover crops back through here, as well as some marigolds and some volunteer Mexican tarragon, also known as Mexican mint marigold. Cowpeas back there will die off as soon as the frost hits. I've got my tiller radish over here, which is more cold hardy and won't start to die back till we regularly drop into the freezing temperatures. I've got a cool season blend up here and little spots of winter rye kind of sprinkled throughout the garden. Now in the cover crop, something I wanted to point out is that if you've got tall plants like okra, tomatoes, peppers are some good examples, that probably won't be coming out till the frost, but you still want to get a cold season cover crop planted. Go ahead and sow right underneath your plants. So you can see here with this okra that I just continued my cover crop blend. The cover crop sprouted up, and when these plants die off, I will just chop them off at the base, and I've already got my cover crop established.
Some of my tomatoes are still hanging on. Now, I've been really impressed with this variety. This is a variety called Summer Sweetheart. I grew it because it reportedly had septorial leaf spot resistance, which is one of my biggest issues here in Ohio. And I have been pleasantly surprised. So it is October and I am still getting really nice fruit off of this thing. It has a very minimal amount of foliar disease, what looks like late blight to me, but I'm not certain. But it has definitely remained healthy and productive much longer than I'm used to with most tomatoes. Now, just to give you an idea, this is what my tomatoes typically look like this time of year. We've got loofahs. I did loofahs on this main arch again this year. I just switched and planted them on the other side of the arch. And I've got more loofahs this year actually than I got last year. I've also got them planted on an arch on the other side of the garden. I don't really need that many loofah sponges, but they're a lot of fun to grow, and I like the way these plants cover up an archway in a hurry. Now, last year I shared a video on how to peel and process the loofahs into sponges, but I also discovered last year that if I just leave some of the loofah gourds out in the elements through the winter, they dry up and slough off their skins on their own without me having to do any of the work. So this year I'm going to do both. I'm going to harvest some and prep them myself. The rest I'm just gonna let hang out here for a while.
And then next to my loofah arch, I've got some of my winter greens planted in this bed. Got radishes, quite a few different lettuces, some volunteer dill, some green onions, and then some very late planted spinach, which will overwinter.
If you watch some of my gardening videos from earlier in the year, you may recognize this area as the place where I had my chickens fenced in. So we did butcher all of those meat chickens. I opened this up, pulled all the straw back, worked the soil a little because it was still very compacted and heavy. I came through basically with a garden fork and then planted this all in rye. Late next spring, I will be cutting the rye down, and this spot should be ready to go either for some mid-season planting, or I might hold off and just do some of my fall crops here. But having the chickens in here should really help with that poor soil quality. And And in this contraption over here, I've got some more of my fall crops, some collards, kale, endive, and escarole. Now this tent comes with two different covers. It's got a frost cover, which I will be swapping out soon, and this, which is kind of an insect netting cover. Now, in certain applications, this would work really well. Right here, it wasn't the best because it's actually shading my plants too much. So I think I'm gonna have to do some tweaking for next year. But this will be really handy to overwinter some of these greens when I do put the frost cover on it.
And moving outside the garden fence, I just wanted to show you really quickly. You may have heard me mention that I lost pretty much all of my pumpkin, squash, and gourds that I planted this year, primarily because of squash vine borer, cucumber beetles. So everything you see here is actually from volunteer plants, which I think is pretty cool. It just goes to show you the resiliency of some of these plants, particularly ones that are kind of a result of survival of the fittest. Out front here, I've got the new chicken yard. The chickens did such a good job prepping that back corner of my garden that I'm now going to move them to any new area that I want garden formed and let them work it for a season or two. So my oldest rooster and oldest hens get the privilege of having their own special little yard here. Back here, I've got a second hugelkultur bed in progress. My original hugel bed, I didn't do the quote-unquote right way. I just piled everything on top of the ground and then wheelbarrowed topsoil and dumped on top of it. This one I actually dug a trench first, and I am slowly filling it with logs and garden debris, and I'll be cleaning out the chicken coop and dumping it in there. And these hugelkultur beds for me have been a great solution to areas that are really low-lying and poor draining and have really heavy clay soil.
And then I've got just a few extras over here at Mom and Dad's planted that I wanted to share with you. The first is my sweet potatoes. I did all of them over here just because of space constraints. But these are coming to the tail end of their season. As soon as that first frost hits, these leaves are going to turn black and shrivel up. And that's typically when I harvest, just to give them the longest season possible. I am a little worried about the kind of vole damage we're going to end up with on these tubers when I harvest, so wish me luck on that one. I've got a bigger broccoli planting over here at Mom and Dad's. I just wanted to show you these because you can see really obviously here how these plants are getting too big for the netting. So I'm going to have to get these off of here very, very soon. And I've actually got some bigger heads of broccoli on this planting already. I've also got a lot of my shell pole beans over here. This particular variety is a variety called Christmas Lima. And just for the sake of time, because I didn't have time to come out here and get these all when they were fresh, I will actually just let these hang until after the frost. These beans will dry down naturally, at which point I can just harvest them all, shell them, and put them in mason jars for storage. And this is my dad's little lima bean house that he created for the grandkids to have a little space to come in here and hide and play. And it turned out pretty neat.
And then of course I have to share one of the volunteer flowers over here as well. This is an amaranth. And my dad doesn't even remember the last time he planted amaranth, and it just keeps volunteering. And it is a really beautiful, impressive plant. Well over 6 feet tall. And they've just kind of popped up everywhere.
So that wraps up what is going on in my Zone 6A Ohio garden in October, just before the first fall frost. I want to thank all of you for visiting with me today. And if you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing to my channel, Growfully with Jenna. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.